in this no disqualification match.
How you feel now, Lita?
Pregnant.
The last classic pay-per-view I reviewed on this channel was one that helped really ignite my passion and obsession with professional wrestling at a young age. So it seems only fair that this week I review a show that damn near killed it. It's time to look at WWE Unforgiven 2004, presented by Raw, from September 12th at the Rose Garden in my hometown of Portland, Oregon. This show was nominated by Chris George and El Jigsaw over on patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. This show was a very big deal for fans in the Northwest, the Portland wrestling scene like I was in, because this was the first WWE pay-per-view to come to the Rose City. But sadly, I could not attend this show. And the reason I couldn't was, during that time, it was sophomore year when I was at U of O, and I was an RA, a resident assistant, basically a hall monitor for those of you who don't know. And looking at me, you can kind of tell that was a job I was born to have. But a part of that job was you weren't allowed to leave campus for more than like a weekend a semester, maybe 2 weekends. So due to the luck of the draw, I was forced to stay on campus during the show. I couldn't go up to Portland to watch it live, so I remember sitting in the dorm room of my complex director, who was a fellow wrestling fan, and we sat there and we watched the show live as it was going on. And as it was going on, we both came to the realization that this show was, how do you put it, awful. It was an absolute dog shit occurrence. Watching every minute of it felt like pain for the most part. And by the end of it, well, the time it was all over, we both kind of thought, oh my God, WWE is never coming back to Portland again. Now, nearly 20 years have passed since this show happened, since I last watched it. And I wonder now, looking back on it all these years later, might my opinion on things be different? Might it be better with age? I don't know. I'm going to sit down and watch this, and you're going to have to suffer with me. It's time to watch Unforgiven 2004. 10,000 folks packed the Rose Garden on this night. I knew probably at least a few of the people there. 239,000 pay-per-view buys is a big drop from the previous year at 360,000. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler are on commentary here for this Raw pay-per-view. Hell of a tagline on that poster, by the way. Insane. Pain. Kane. The set I thought was an interesting choice, kind of looking like the rectangular panels like flying out at you in kind of this 3D shape. It was a weird choice to have that floating LED sign above the ring just to remind you of the show you were watching. One fun thing I noticed watching this show was the Portland crowd really sounds unlike anything else at this time watching Raw during this period, because, you know, the crowd can be really quiet during like the lull points in matches and stuff, but when they see something they like, oh, they're super loud about it. Your opening contest sees William Regal and Chris Benoit taking on Evolution's Ric Flair and Batista. Regal's been at war with Triple H and Evolution for months now. Of course, earlier in the year, he was the caretaker of young Master Eugene. He had a big change of heart and befriended Eugene and tried to help him fight Triple H. And of course, this resulted in Regal taking a lot of hellacious beatings as a result from Evolution. Trips recently put Eugene out of his misery in a cage match. More on that later. Meanwhile, Benoit is still fighting Evolution after what went down at WrestleMania 20. It's kind of a big fall from grace when you're the main event of SummerSlam, then the very next month you're curtain jerking in this very mid-card match, and no sign of you getting back in the world title picture anytime soon. The match begins early on. Batista gets a cheap shot in on Benoit from the apron, leads to Benoit getting a receipt in full view of the referee, so I guess they're just now even. Flair and Benoit get into a chopping war. The Nature Boy is beaten to and fro for a while. He actually flare flops twice in a single go, but the fans love it each time. Batista finally tagged in, more shenanigans in the corner, and Evolution takes over. Flair gets Willie Reegs in the figure four for a bit. Flair with a cool little roll into the tag there. The crowd is begging for Benoit to get in there. They pop just when he runs in to break up the pin, so even though he lost the world title a month ago, he is still over as hell. We get a noggin knock out of the corner, allowing for a hot tag to Benoit and Flair. We get the Germans, the headbutt, putting Flair in the crossface. Batista just walks up and picks Benoit up like a child and throws him to the mat. Spinebuster to Regal, but on the outside, Batista hurls himself over the barricade, crossface to Flair, the Nature Boy taps, and Regal and Benoit win. I'm going to give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. It's a hell of an opening match with 3 great workers and Batista. Jokes aside, he will get better. But no, I think this match was a good jumping off point for the show. Sadly though, it is one of the few bright spots you're going to see on this event. Backstage, Christian and semi-regular squeeze Trish Stratus are arguing over who gets the rights to Tomko for one last time tonight. Tomko is made to choose, and Trish offers some sort of sexy sex thing to Tomko, who tells Christian good luck. And the segment ends with Christian going, "She is a slut." slut. My favorite part about the logic of this thing where Tomko has to choose is like they make it known Tomko can't even be at ringside in the ladder match with Christian. So wow, your choice is either hang out in the back or walk Trish to the ring and maybe get some sexy sex time afterward. Tough choice. Women's championship match up next as Trish Stratus defends against Victoria. Trish won the women's title back in June, but has spent a lot of this time period on the shelf with a broken hand. The fact that she held onto this title for months while injured, despite the fact that on this very same show, like a couple weeks before this, Edge is stripped of the IC title after being injured for a week, really tells you just how much bullshit that whole trope is if it's not applied evenly. And since her heel turn at WrestleMania 20, Trish has been a jerk to everyone, especially Lita. Victoria has been owed a title match for a while now as Trish has been convalescing, so she's finally getting her opportunity. And the big twist with this build is, in the last few weeks, Victoria has gotten some help from a, quote, mystery woman who folks were able to figure out pretty much immediately.
And Trish looks like she's seen a ghost scooting out of the ring there.
Early slut chants, Jerry Lawler saying in almost dead serious tones, Trish Stratus is not a slut. Trish fights dirty in the corner, but Victoria powers out, drops Trish the gutbuster. Victoria goes up top, but Tomko just picks Trish up and places her further away. Victoria with a hard collision into the ring post and falls straight down to the floor. Trish stays in control. She stops a comeback attempt with a spine buster. A sleeper is applied. We get a "We want puppies" chant. Well, women's wrestling still has a way to go here, I guess. Victoria fights back, goes on a big run, dives on a Tomko for good measure, but she gets chased by him. That distracts her long enough to get hit with the Stratusfaction for Trish to win and retain. Boy, Victoria sure looked stupid here. 2 stars out of 5 for me. I thought the action was fine enough, but man, that finish really soured me on this thing. I mean, it's bad enough that we already kind of know that, hey, the money is in Trish versus Lita. Once Lita gets out of this whole pregnancy storyline, that's where the angle's headed. So it seems like a foregone conclusion that Trish is retaining here, but you gotta make your baby faces look smarter than this. And it's kind of a trend you're gonna see on this show where when a lot of the baby faces do lose, it's because of really dumb reasons. Tomko lifts up Victoria for more damage, but is cut off by the mystery woman. Everyone say it now. But this is not over as Tomko gets on the mic and calls out the so-called mystery woman, calling him a cross-dressing hermaphrodite. Hoo boy. JR calling this the worst kept secret in WWE, but King telling him to go along with it, and he just goes, oh, okay. Show us how much you care on commentary. Stevie gets a slap in, but then Tomko just beats the crap out of him for several uninterrupted minutes. The beating continues as Tomko strips, obviously, Stevie Richards. JR and King feel like they're sleepwalking through this whole mess. This match is very painful to watch, not just because of the inherent drag bashing we are seeing in this, not just from Tomko's actions, but also the trash talk he is saying as the match goes on, but also this goes on forever, and you could hear a pin drop in that crowd. Remember how I mentioned the crowd would be quiet during the low points? They're even quieter still as this match goes on. Finally, after a very long time, Stevie hits this switch and gets a testicular claw locked in, which finally wakes the crowd up. He goes on a big run, then is distracted by his bra on the mat. Then Tomko hits his finish and wins. Stevie, my friend, I'm so sorry for this. -5 stars. This is honestly one of the worst matches I've ever seen. Not from like, oh my God, it's so bad, it's funny kind of thing. It's like, God, this thing is just so awkward and so hard to watch for so many reasons. You know, it's a terrible angle, it's a terrible match, terrible commentary, zero payoff. They go absolutely nowhere with this afterward. There is that connection of Stevie Richards and Victoria from like a year or so earlier, but that was kind of abandoned, then came back here, and then it dropped once again. This is just, it's just so bad. People paid money to watch this on pay-per-view. I would rather watch 24 hours of Katie Vick on a loop than watch this match again. I'm sorry. Thankfully, we pick things up with a ladder match for the vacant Intercontinental Championship as Captain Charisma Christian takes on Chris Jericho. Jericho had been feuding with Edge, Jericho wanting a rematch for the belt, but Edge tore his groin over the weekend and cannot compete. Suddenly, in returns Christian, who's been out with an injury after fighting Jericho in a cage. General Manager Eric Bischoff strips Edge of the title for being hurt and not able to defend it in 30 days. Again, keep in mind what happened to Trish all this time while she was champion. So it's decided that Chris and Christian will fight for the vacant title at the pay-per-view in this here ladder match. My favorite part of this build here, it's very sudden build, but there's an interview segment here where Jericho and Christian and Bischoff are all talking, and Christian's like, what if we make this a no count-out match? And the fans are booing, and Christian goes, no, they're saying boo-yah, they want this match. It was hilarious. Also, not only is it weird to watch this match less than a week after I saw Christian wrestle another great ladder match in May of 2023, it also dawned on me that in both of the times a WWE pay-per-view has come to Portland, Jericho worked a ladder match each time. Christian starts the match off with a slap, but Jericho's had enough guff. Christian with the sell of the night after a suplex. Fighting on the outside, Jericho grabs a ladder and puts it to use. He almost takes Christian's head off, but the captain ducks. Brawling makes its way into the crowd for a minute there, Jericho even using the cables to choke him out. Christian responds with the unprettier on the floor. He makes his way up the ladder, but Jericho gets back in the ring just in time. Ladder is set up in the corner. Christian takes a freaking header into the top of it. Holy shit. JR with a great line, not even barbecue sauce can make that taste better. Christian catapults Chris face first into the ladder, wants to go for a ladder sandwich attack, but Jericho just throws it back at Christian. By the way, Christian would have been hurt regardless if Jericho moved. Christian climbs again. Jericho distracts him with the single deuce. Oh, now you've done it. Christian comes back down and pays for it. We get a face buster on the ladder, another ladder sandwich. Lion salt attempt is missed, unless he aimed for the ladder, that is. Christian gets so high up you could call him Rob Van Dam, but Jericho pulls the ladder out from under him and he's dangling, then knocked way down after a ladder shot. Jericho climbs and is tilted off the top. We get the walls of Jericho on the ladder, but it looks not great. Jericho knocked off, falling onto the ladder. Looks like his tailbones hurt pretty bad when he lands. Ouch. Christian produces an even bigger ladder and starts to climb. They fight up top. Suddenly we get a face buster. They both crash down to the mat. Jericho climbs back up and grabs the belt to become the new Intercontinental Champion, starting his then record 7th reign. This one gets 4.5 stars out of 5 for me. Call me crazy, folks, but I think this is going to be the best match we see all show here. And especially after watching Tomko and Richards beforehand, this was a most excellent palate cleanser. Tell you what, Christian has just proven time and time again how he really is the master at ladder matches over the years. Like we just saw it like last month, like I said here. When he's in a ladder match, you know it's going to be good. It's a really must watch, this one. Backstage, Lita emerges from Kane's locker room and angrily tells the Grish that she hopes that Shawn Michaels beats the hell out of her husband and sends him to the hospital. Kane emerges from his very red room and stops her in her tracks, saying that this match with Shawn Michaels is now going to be no DQ. He tells Lita that whatever happens to Shawn in the match tonight will be on her head as well as his own, then forces himself a kiss on Lita. Spoiler alert, that guy's going to turn babyface in 24 hours. Elsewhere backstage, the coach is with the new IC champ Chris Jericho. He may have been sodomized by a ladder earlier, but he's the 7-time champ and feels on top of the world. Edge appears with a terrible goatee and tells Jericho that when he's back in shape, the title is his. Up next, a no DQ matchup as Shawn Michaels returns to the ring for the first time in months to take on the man who took him out of action in Kane. Kane beat Matt Hardy in the Till Death Do Us Part match at SummerSlam, married Lita in an insane segment on Raw, and as a wedding present, Kane has a contract for the match of his choice, but Lita signed the contract herself to put Kane against Shawn Michaels. Shawn is guns blazing from the beginning, goes for an axe handle off the top but is cut off. Shawn fights back, Lita gets in her husband's face, Shawn with a dive to the outside. Kane using Lita as a shield helps him take over. Big suplex through the Spanish announce table. More nuggets of wisdom on commentary here. Lawler saying that sex without love is an empty experience, but as far as empty experiences go, it's a pretty good one. They're referring to a storyline rape here, by the way. Shawn, beaten down for several minutes with a couple of hope spots thrown in, finally takes Kane down with a forearm, and the comeback commences for about a second until he's thrown into the steel steps and starts a gushing. Kane goes to kick HBK's head off, but Shawn moves and mounts an offensive, the top rope elbow. Shawn goes for the super kick, but Kane hits the boot first. He signals for the choke slam, but Shawn with a low blow grabs a chair and dinks Kane in the head. Kane gets up first and goes for the chair, but Lita takes it from him. Kane is distracted, but not fully. He goes for the choke slam. HBK turns out of it and hits the super kick, the cover, and the win. 4 stars out of 5 for me on this one. I forgot that this was actually another good match on this card. I really enjoyed the David versus Goliath aspect of it. Adding the no DQ wrinkle at the last minute, I think added just enough extra spice to make this match pay off. I think helped tell the story of Shawn's comeback a little bit better here. Also, fun fact, this was the match that led to Shawn Michaels' lazy eye. He apparently got hit really hard in the face at one point here, and the impact of that shot got progressively worse to the point where they couldn't really ignore it anymore, and Shawn would make jokes about it later on air. And of course, one night after this show on Raw, we would get the debut of Snitsky. There's a hype package for the returning Shelton Benjamin, who's been gone for the last month with an injury, and the tagline for this says, "Call him Mr. Benjamin." Yeah, that never took off. Backstage, Todd Grisham interviewing Triple H. He says, "Randy Orton beat Chris Benoit when you couldn't. Will you be able to beat Randy Orton?" Triple H says Orton was just a regular guy until Evolution came along and picked him up. He puts over Orton a lot in this promo and makes him sound good, but says it's all because of him and that Orton is nothing without him. He says the title is more important to him than life itself. He brings up when Randy Orton spat in his face a few weeks ago, which gets the crowd really hyped up, but says it will be he who does the spitting tonight. In your semi-main event for the World Tag Team Championships, La Resistance, that's Sylvain Grenier and Robert Conway, defend against Rhino and Tajiri. These two tandems have been feuding for a while at this point. In fact, Rhino actually had to beat Conway on Raw a few weeks ago in sort of a last chance match in order for him to qualify for this tag title match. The foreign French flies make their way to the ring. Sylvain Grenier singing "O Canada" in his native French to a chorus of boos, only to be cut off by Rhino and Tajiri. Starting off with Taj and Grenier, Conway later comes in, as does the bull-like Rhino, in Jim Ross's words. By the way, the last time Rhino worked this building was at a house show in Portland back like Thanksgiving weekend the previous year. I did attend that show. I'll always remember this. He starts off the match by cutting a promo saying, "I love Portland." Then he loses the match and picks up the mic again and goes, "I changed my mind. I hate Portland." Great stuff. The heels work Rhino's arm for a while. Tajiri's back in. He lights up Conway with those kicks. He takes the heat for a while. We get a USA chant. Lawler pointing out that Tajiri is Japanese. Rhino with the hot tag, but you can tell by this point the crowd is very tired on this night. Rhino kicks out of a double team move and Tajiri just enters the match. The Quebec flag comes into play and backfires against La Res. The gore by Rhino. Conway putting Grenier's foot on the rope though. Sylvain bops Rhino with the flagpole. The cover and the win. The champs retain. 2 stars out of 5 for me on this one. The match was just pretty so-so. Very clearly the come-down match you're supposed to have between Shawn and Kane, and then the main event of Triple H versus Orton. But this one is definitely that. It's the weakest of those last 3 matches. And again, Rhino kind of walking into the flagpole like he does. Another example of baby faces looking not so bright on this show. But now it's time for the World Heavyweight Championship match as Randy Orton takes on his former mentor in Triple H. Back at SummerSlam, Orton beat Chris Benoit to become the youngest world champion in history. Take that, Brock Lesnar. And the very next night, Evolution kicked him out of the group. Triple H said it wasn't Orton's time yet and the title needed to go back to Triple H to make everything right. So Triple H calls out Orton, tells him, "Give me the belt." But instead, Orton just hawks a loogie and spits in Triple H's face. Now, that was a bright point in Orton's babyface run here, but in general, this turn of babyface is just bad. I've talked about this before on this channel, but it cannot be overstated just how terribly mismanaged Orton's babyface turn was. Because you see, usually, if you're a heel and you turn babyface, there's usually some kind of process where you become cooler to follow for the fans, where they begin to cheer you and support you despite your heelish tactics, until the bookers just say, "Here, damn," and make them babyface. But Orton really did not get that process. He got a handshake from Benoit after he won at SummerSlam, and I guess that's all it took, because otherwise, Orton is still the guy he was before he was kicked out of Evolution, only now he's smiling more and making funny faces and cracking jokes. If only his character were, a bit more likable. Like I said, he didn't earn the fans' respect before his face turn. He's just there because, hey, he's not Triple H and he doesn't like Triple H anymore. So yay, let's cheer him, I guess. To give you an idea of how poorly managed Orton's face run was here in the build to Unforgiven, Triple H is still going through his beef with Eugene. They fight at SummerSlam, and then they get a rematch on Raw. It's no DQ. Orton costs Triple H the match, and has big rah-rah moment for Orton. Then the following week, though, Eugene is just in more trouble because he's put in another match with Triple H in a cage match. He gets the hell beat out of him. He's written off. Orton is nowhere to be found to protect him. What a hero. The match begins. Triple H gives a shove. Orton responds with a slap to start things off, then spits on him again. Orton on top for a while with a lot of punches and uppercuts. Trips begins to go for the leg. Nice drop toe hold into a grapevine. He attacks the leg with the ring post. King says Orton's going to school as JR calls the challenger Professor H. Does that make Evolution and the Authority his versions of the X-Men? The figure 4 is applied. Trips blatantly cheating for a while until Hebner catches him. Finally, Orton pushes H off and into the ring post, and now he's bleeding. Power slam by Orton begins to mount his comeback, poke to the eye, and a drop kick. Triple H fights back, goes to the flying nothing, but Orton puts the boot up. You know Orton's a babyface now because he has the top rope cross body back in his arsenal. Orton goes to the RKO, but Triple H shoves him into the ref, and Earl goes flying. Randy hits his move, but now no referee. In comes the dirtiest player in Triple H, Ric Flair. He goes out. In comes Batista. Orton outmaneuvers him. A low blow by H. In comes the coach who puts on a referee shirt and makes the count, but Orton still kicks out. And Orton goes on a tear here, fighting off Batista, Triple H, the coach. Finally, Triple H with one of the biggest dinks of the chair you will ever see. A pedigree on that chair. H-Man with the cover, having her thrown back into the ring. The count, the 3. Triple H regains the world title, and Jim Ross finally turns the volume up in his voice for the first time all night as he shouts that Triple H stole the title. I love JR's line near the end of the show here where he says, "We're just going to make 3 world titles and give them to all 3 members of Evolution." Well, in 2023, you were half right. Fade to black. I give this main event 2 stars out of 5. It is a very long, boring match for the most part. Then for the last 5 minutes, it's a great match. And I think Orton looks like $1 million in this thing. It reminds me a lot of Raven versus DDP in 1998, as a matter of fact, in their Raven's Rules match at Spring Stampede. I think that a move like this would have been fine if Orton were able to get his heat back, or get his win back, or win the championship back from Triple H. None of that shit happens until years later when the face and heel roles are reversed and Orton lost all that momentum and never really got it back for a very long time. Like, it's such a poor move they did this thing. And we get Orton popping out of a cake the next night and throwing Triple H into it, which was, again, very funny, but I feel like this was just the real cherry on top to an otherwise shit-ass show. My grade for Unforgiven 2004 is a D. Now, were it not for the ladder match and Shawn Michaels versus Kane, this show would absolutely be a dud. Instead, it is only very nearly a dud. Like, I'm sorry, even if you take out the drag aspect of this thing, Tomko versus Stevie Richards is one of the worst matches I have ever seen, and the added element makes it even worse. And then you've got so many baby faces looking bad and just getting beat by dumb reasons. So many things on this show either have no payoff or a very badly fumbled payoff after this. I think that watching this show back, it's amazing that they went back to Portland. It took 4 years for them to do it for pay-per-view, but they did. I remember just like watching this show here for this review, I was transported back in time to be being 19 years old again, watching this miserable show with my complex director in his room and everything, and feeling just very tired and angry at the end of it. But now, having watched it again 19 years later, I guess finally there's some closure to it, you know? Well, you know how I feel now, but what did you think of Unforgiven 2004? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this review, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and hit that bell icon to get all the notifications for when I drop content. Next time here on the Classic Review, we are going way back in time to a whole different company. We're going back to WCW, back to '93, and we're talking about Beach Blast. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.